Hi, Tam here. So first of all, I am not anti-vax. I believe in vaccines. I believe in immunization. I believe in the WHO worldwide immunization program. I believe that vaccines have saved millions of children from polio, from smallpox back in the days, from a multitude of diseases. I have seen the suffering of those who were not fortunate enough to get vaccinated. And so once again, I am pro-vaccine. But let's talk about the COVID vaccines. In 2020, in fact, when COVID was declared a pandemic, and when the lockdown started in March 2020, all I was seeing in hospital at the time was just COVID patients. Remember back then, it was the original strain, and then you went to Alpha, Delta, those were killer strains. And it was heartbreaking to see people desaturating and dying of COVID. At the time, like I said, I was only seeing COVID patients. Then mid-year through 2020, I became a global pandemic doctor. And just to reiterate, I'm not an anti-vaccine guy, and I'm not against Pfizer. So I've got no problem with Pfizer. When the rollout of vaccines came out in 2021, the first rollout of COVID vaccines were AstraZeneca. And having read about AstraZeneca, about the potential side effects, I refused to get it. I said, no, I'm going to wait for Pfizer. I was more comfortable with Pfizer. That's a personal choice. Nothing wrong if you got your vaccines from other pharmaceuticals. I got my first dose, I got my second dose, and yes, it was a great idea to be vaccinated. The number of ICU cases decreased after vaccination, which is essential because ICUs were clogged up. So the numbers of ICU COVID cases were decreasing, and so far so good. But I must say I'm disappointed. While the mRNA vaccine was great in decreasing the symptoms, right? Because that's what the mRNA Pfizer vaccine, the BioNTech Pfizer vaccine was designed to do. And so my understanding was, that's great, I'm vaccinated. I'm not going to end up like my friends and colleagues who died of COVID. I've got a shield somehow. Now I can go back to work, deal with COVID patients, There's that element of added security against COVID. And no problem, like I said, it was a good idea to get vaccinated. It was a good idea for my friends and family members to get vaccinated. No problem there. But somehow, the message about getting vaccinated changed in the media, right? It was no longer about decreasing the duration of symptoms and the intensity of the symptoms. It was no longer about get vaccinated, it will decrease your chances to end up in ICU on a ventilator. Get vaccinated, you will have some added protection against the virus if or when you get the virus. And that message was very good, very positive, and I agree with that. But somehow, the message changed in the media to become, it's not just that you are decreasing the chance of getting severe COVID disease, it's also that you are decreasing the chances of transmission. You remember when that switch came through?
We're learning now with recent studies that even if you do get a breakthrough infection when you're vaccinated, the chances of your transmitting it to someone else is exceedingly low. So low likelihood of transmission, low likelihood of getting infected.
Somehow the message got hijacked and a mind trick was pulled, and now it became about get vaccinated to protect others. And so we're gonna vaccinate more. Yes, fine, you're 21 years old, you're an athlete, you have no comorbidities, you're in good shape, chances of you getting severe COVID are minimal, but get vaccinated. because that will prevent transmission of the virus to your parents, to your grandparents, to the elderly in your community.
The fact is, this is one of the encouraging aspects about the efficacy of the vaccine. It'll either protect you completely against infection. If you do get infected, the chances are that you're going to be without symptoms, and the chances are very likely that you'll not be able to transmit it to other people.
You really have to read between the lines here, because this is the art of saying nothing. This is comical, right? This is the art of deceiving people. So he says the fact is, it's a fact, you're gonna get protected 100%. But he doesn't say that. He says
it'll either protect you completely against infection. If you do get infected,
it will either protect you completely against infection. But if you do get infected, so look, if you're gonna get protected completely, then it's impossible for you to get infected, right? So either you're gonna get protected completely, 100%, or you're gonna get infected. So what he's saying is that you're not getting 100% protection. But he's phrasing it in such a way that, anyway.
you completely against infection. If you do get infected, the chances are that you're going to be without symptoms, and the chances are very likely that you'll not be able to transmit it to other people.
We all know now that this is complete BS, right? Millions of us got infected after getting fully vaccinated and boosted, and still got symptomatic. And in terms of transmission, we now know, or we knew from the beginning, that it was never about stopping transmission, right? You're getting vaccinated, it's not going to stop the transmission. You can still get the virus, and you will get the virus if you're exposed to the virus, but you will not suffer from severe symptoms. But you can still pass it on to others.
The science behind it, I mean, obviously there's discussion and concern
Let's listen to the
about
science.
the abruptness of the announcement and all that, but the science behind it, the fact that we know now that these vaccines are highly, highly effective, number one. Number two, they're really, really good against variants. I mean, the predominant variant.
We don't know that. Almost every variant can evade the latest boosters.
We're learning now with recent studies that even if you do get a breakthrough infection when you're vaccinated, the chances of your transmitting it to someone else is exceedingly low.
Exceedingly low. Exceedingly low. If you're vaccinated, the chances of you transmitting the virus to somebody else are exceedingly low. Exceedingly low. Of course, it's not true. Just look at cruise ships, where every crew member is vaccinated, fully vaccinated, and boosted, and yet the virus circulates around and people get infected and people get isolated every day because the vaccine was never designed to stop transmission.
Transmitting it to someone else is exceedingly low. So low likelihood of transmission, low likelihood of getting infected.
Low likelihood of infection, low likelihood of transmission. This is a sales speech for vaccines. Again, I am pro-vaccine, but this is ridiculous. This is comical, you know.
And because of that, that was the accumulating scientific data that prompted the CDC to make that recommendation that when people are vaccinated, they can feel safe that they are not going to get infected, whether they're outdoors or indoors. That's the bottom line of that, to get people to appreciate you get vaccinated. That was the accumulating scientific data that prompted the CDC to make that recommendation that when people are vaccinated, they can feel safe that they are not going to get infected.
What accumulation of what scientific data? What scientific data was saying that if you're vaccinated, you're not going to get infected? And because you're not going to get infected, you're not going to transmit the disease.
Was the Pfizer COVID vaccine tested on stopping the transmission of the virus before it entered the market? If not, please say it clearly. If yes, are you willing to share the data with this committee? And I really want a straight answer, yes or no, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Regarding the question around, did we know about stopping immunisation before it's entered the market? No. We had to really move at the speed of science to really understand what is taking place in the market. And from that point of view, we had to do everything at risk.
I mean, back then, if I had made a video about that, I was going to get a strike and probably my channel would have been deleted. But now it's quite obvious. Most of the world is vaccinated and most of the world is still transmitting the virus.
The CDC to make that recommendation that when people are vaccinated, they can feel safe that they are not going to get infected, whether they're outdoors or indoors. That's the bottom line of that, to get people to appreciate you get vaccinated and you're really quite safe.
That's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. If you get vaccinated, you're not going to transmit the virus. In fact, you're not going to get infected. That's the bottom line. You know, as a doctor or an academic, you should never use words like, this is a fact, this is the bottom line. No. These are words that you don't use in science because science, new discoveries are being made every day. And if you're going to be categorical like that, then you're going to embarrass yourself a month later.
Outdoors or indoors. That's the bottom line of that, to get people to appreciate you get vaccinated and you're really quite safe from getting infected. There will always be breakthrough infections,
right.
But given the denominator of people who are vaccinated, that's a very, very rare event. So the
a very, very rare event. That's a very, very rare event. A very, very rare event that people get to transmit the virus after being infected if they've already been vaccinated. A very, very rare event. But also very, very common.
So I guess I want to read this quote to you by Zeynep Tufekci, who's a sociologist who studies pandemic, has been, I think a good and reliable sort of public intellectual on this, and was an early proponent of masking, pointing to, and she said this basically: the CDC guidelines are essentially implying the risk the vaccinated will transmit the virus to others, including their unvaccinated children, is so vanishing low that it is not worth worrying about. But if that's their position, they should state it clearly and explain it, not just say fully vaccinated people have a reduced risk of transmitting the virus. And what I'm hearing from you is kind of the first paragraph, that like, if you're vaccinated, you really don't need to worry about getting it in a way that's serious or transmitting it.
That is true.
That is true.
That is correct.
That is correct.
I think that's clarifying for folks, honestly. Because
that is true. That is correct. You don't need to worry about transmitting the disease or even getting it if you're fully vaccinated, right?
If you're vaccinated, you really don't need to worry about getting it in a way that's serious or transmitting it.
That is true. That is correct, Chris.
I think that's clarifying for folks.
Yeah, it's clarifying. I mean, you've clarified everything now.
There was hesitancy in the beginning, I think, at the early part of the data to say that definitively because, and correct me if I'm wrong, there was worry that because the dependent variable that the drug trials were testing on were infections and not transmission, it remained possible, though not likely, that there was some hidden risk of transmission, right? And what I'm getting from you and getting from the CDC is like, the data's coming back and that's not a problem.
You nailed it, Chris. That's correct.
Okay.
That's absolutely correct. You know, that's one of the things. The CDC is a science-based institution. And when they make recommendations based on the science, often they get criticized that they don't come out and make a recommendation because they're waiting.
Yeah, but that was not made on any science. Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson, Sinotech, no pharmaceutical company came out to say that our vaccine is going to prevent transmission. No. That narrative was developed by the media and then embraced by the CDC and then, dissipated by Dr. Fauci here, and nothing to do with Pfizer or other pharmaceutical companies. They have never stated that our vaccine is going to stop transmission. At the same time, they didn't deny it when people like that were live on TV, propagating this BS.
You nailed it, Chris. That's correct.
Okay.
That's absolutely correct. That's one of the things. The CDC is a science-based institution. And when they make recommendations based on the science, often they get criticized that they don't come out and make a recommendation because they're waiting for all the dots to be, the T's to be crossed and the I's to be dotted.
Yeah, they surely waited for all the T's to be crossed and all the I's to be dotted. And all the T's were crossed and the I's were dotted, and the conclusion was, if you're fully vaccinated, the risk of transmitting the virus is minimal, negligent, insignificant. It's practically zero.
For all the dots to be, the T's to be crossed and the I's to be dotted about it. And now when we say we have more cumulative information, it's very clear. And that's the reason why I'm on the show talking to you about it, to help to clarify it. You're absolutely right. You said it correctly. The risk is extremely low of getting infected, of getting sick, or of transmitting it to anybody else. Full stop.
Full stop.
Really exciting, wonderful news.
Full stop. Again, a word you don't want to use in science. But anyway, full stop. The risk of getting infected, the risk of transmitting the virus after you're fully vaccinated is gone. Full stop. Full stop.
Transmitting it to anybody else. Full stop.
That's really exciting, wonderful news.
Yeah, that's wonderful news, man. Yep, that's wonderful news, man. Oh, wait, there's an update.
We are seeing that the ability of individuals who are infected through breakthrough infections, namely vaccinated people who ultimately get infected, that they are generally without symptoms or minimally symptomatic. However, it is clear that they are capable of transmitting the infection to uninfected individuals.
What are you talking about?
Data that they reported.
What's going on? You told us that it was impossible. If you're fully vaccinated, that you're not going to transmit the disease, the virus. The T's had been crossed, the I's had been dotted, the science was in. It is a fact. Full stop. And now, it is clear now.
For all the dots to be, the T's to be crossed and the I's to be dotted about it. And now when we say we have more cumulative information, it's very clear. The risk is extremely low of getting infected, of getting sick, or of transmitting it to anybody else. Full stop. It's very clear.
It is clear that they are capable of transmitting the infection to uninfected individuals. And the data that they reported indicates that if you look at the level of virus in the nasopharynx of a person who's vaccinated,
what about the previous
and has a
data?
breakthrough infection, and compare that to the level of virus in the nasopharynx of an unvaccinated person who's infected, they're essentially equivalent, which would go along and underscore
Can you believe that?
the fact that vaccinated people.
So now I've pulled out some data to say that it turns out the level of virulence, meaning the number of viruses, the viral load that a fully vaccinated person carries in his nasopharynx is equivalent to an infected, non-vaccinated person. And so the transmission risk or rate is exactly the same. So he's saying now that vaccination does nothing to prevent transmission any more than if you're dealing with a person that's not vaccinated. Now, again, I'm not breaching any YouTube guideline. It's not me saying that, it's Fauci. The same Fauci, he was saying, so it's not me, I'm simply showing you a video where Fauci speaks. So I'm not breaching any guidelines. Don't strike my channel, don't delete my channel, please. And so that's the big but. COVID vaccination is good, but we were lied to about the transmission risks, and that lie caused us to vaccinate certain groups of people, certain demographics that did not need to be vaccinated. And the reason we have vaccinated those groups is because our understanding is that, yes, they're not at risk, but they can transmit the virus to people who are at risk, elderly people, immunocompromised people, and so on. And that was a lie. So that's the first lie. And this lie cascaded into a second lie, or rather, second negative effect of the first lie. Since you do not want to contribute to stopping the spread of the virus, if you do not want to be vaccinated, you will not be allowed in certain places and in your workplace. The COVID passports. So many countries now then started with the COVID passports. Completely anti-democratic, but I was also under the impression then that, you're selfish. So you don't want to get vaccinated. And so yes, you should not be allowed to take a job in a place where you're going to transmit the disease to others. All those people who were not allowed to work, who lost their job because now you don't want to be vaccinated, you're going to catch the disease and transmit it to others. It wasn't true. It wasn't true. Again, I'm not anti-vax, I believe in vaccination, but if you as an adult back then had chosen not to be vaccinated, it was your right, because you not being vaccinated was not going to affect the transmission of the virus. Even us being vaccinated, it turns out, yes, we would get mild symptoms, but we would also transmit the virus to others. My understanding, what they made us to believe is that because we're vaccinated, even if we get the virus, the viral load will be less, and that's why we'll get lesser symptoms, and we'll be less likely to transmit the virus as virulently as compared to those who are not vaccinated. But that's not true. Even when vaccinated, the rate of transmission remains the same. There was no research done to say otherwise. Pfizer has stated that there had been no proof and no research to say otherwise. People lost their jobs. People were ostracized. And so, that's what happens when capitalism takes over medicine. These vaccines, we all know now that Pfizer made over $100 billion in profits from the vaccines and are still making quite a bit of money.
Pourquoi est-ce que le prix du vaccin, et ça c'est pour Pfizer, a augmenté de 20%? Pourquoi? Est-ce que vous faites toujours, comme le disait la People's Vaccine Alliance il y a un an, $1000 de profit par seconde grâce à ce vaccin? Sinon, combien par seconde, par jour, par semaine? Et finalement, grâce à ce vaccin, combien d'argent en dividendes est-ce que vous avez pu verser extra ou en bonus vis-à-vis de votre management?
So, look, I understand you've talked a lot of pricing and thrown out a lot of prices, but from our point of view, we cannot discuss pricing. Pricing is confidential. And from that point of view, I know, again, you're going to be very frustrated. I can see it in your faces. You're going to be very frustrated with my answer. But pricing is confidential. And from that point of view, I am not able to have a conversation with you.
Part of pushing this vaccination and this boosting process so aggressively all over the world, and not just by Pfizer, but by the others as well. You know, I'm concentrating on Pfizer because I got Pfizer myself, and you know, but this is the problem. When you have got big pharma, giant pharmaceuticals, with so much power through money that they can influence the world, the lobbyists, governments, institutions like the FDA, right? I mean, the vaccines, the COVID vaccines, it was an emergency decree. It's now more than 2 years since the pandemic started. We're now in October. Right? The virus was discovered on the 30th of December 2019. A global pandemic declared in early 2020. And now we are towards the end of 2022. I mean, can we really have a pandemic for 2 years? No, there's no more pandemic. It's now an endemic situation, obviously. Yeah. Again, I don't want you to get the wrong message here. I am pro-vaccination. And it is a good thing that we got vaccinated. But we were lied to. Did Pfizer and Moderna and Johnson's and the rest lie? I couldn't find any documentation that says that Pfizer or Moderna or Astra or, you know, or said that take our vaccine, it will decrease the risk of transmission. I couldn't find that in the literature. I'm still searching for it. But there's definitely literature from certain organizations and institutions, such as the CDC, that said that, you know, it is necessary to vaccinate everybody, including children, because that will decrease the risk of transmission. And the media also pushed that, obviously, because various CDCs pushed that. But the pharmaceutical companies, such as Pfizer, did not put out a statement to say that no, our vaccine is not going to decrease any transmission risk. It's not going to decrease, it's going to affect the velocity of transmission of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. They never said, all right? So by not commenting on that, by omitting to say that this is not what they were saying, they basically were agreeing to that, and that was going to drive more sales and more profit. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. I don't want to make this video too long because I've got so much more to say. But I want to talk about the boosters as well. All right? You will get your first dose, you will get your second dose of an mRNA vaccine, such as Pfizer. And then it was said that, you know, we needed boosters. In countries like the US, people were getting boosters after boosters. It became a situation where we were told that you will get your booster, but your booster was only gonna give you protection for roughly about 90 days. And so after that, you might need another booster. And I was thinking, wow, 3 months? Come on, you're gonna get 4 boosters a year on top of your 2 doses of the, no, it becomes ridiculous. And potentially dangerous because, look, let's not forget about the side effects, you know, such as VITT, you know, which is a serious thing. But anyway, be as it may, we're then told that even if you have been vaccinated and you have COVID, after you got COVID, you would still need to get a booster 90 days later. Why? If you get COVID, you got your first dose, your second dose, you're up to date with your vaccination, right? And then you get COVID, your natural immunity, because now you've contracted the SARS-CoV-2 virus, so you've got antibodies against the virus itself. It's not like you've been primed, your antibodies have been primed because of a protein that has been injected into your system. No, now you got the real thing. You obviously survived it. Your antibodies, your natural immunity will last longer. It was proven in the literature. It would last longer than a booster. So why, after getting COVID, must you get a booster after 3 months? Especially since it was proven that people would get a booster after getting their vaccination, and some people within 30 days of getting their booster will get COVID again. And quite a number of people will get COVID before the 90 days. So what was the point of getting the boosters every 90 days? And my final point is, there's a new booster in town. We told the new Pfizer booster will help combat the latest Omicron B4, B5. Good. But going through the literature, I now see that this new booster, this new Pfizer booster, has been tested in less than a dozen mice. I thought I must be misreading something. The thing was tested in 8 mice. Am I missing something here? We're going to roll out, it's been rolled out already, it's being rolled out. So we're rolling out a booster globally. We're rolling out this booster to millions of people. And this booster has been tested in 8 mice. Eight mice, I mean, I can gather 30 mice in my garage and conduct an experiment over a 2-week period alone in my garage with 30 mice. You mean a huge corporation like Pfizer could only test in 8 mice? Something that's going to be rolled out internationally, all over the world. 8 mice. Even if you had said 8 human beings, it wouldn't have been enough. Even if you had said 80 patients, human beings, it wouldn't have been enough. But no, we're not talking about 80 human beings. We're not talking about 8 human beings. We're not talking about 8 primates. We're talking about 8 mice. So okay, 8 mice tested, seems okay. Let's roll it out to the people. I mean, a mouse and a human being, it's not the same. Cheers.